Alright, this is going to be the stupidest Mr. Repzion video I have ever listened to so far, and that's saying something. I didn't bother inviting anyone else because I just want to get this out of the way. It's so stupid and painful. Today, Mr. Repzion goes and talks with another YouTube user, Mario, and I don't even feel that Mario did a good job. I mean, he just went to a Matt Slick website, Carmen, which sucks, by the way, when I maybe unless you're starting out, but normally I would not advise anyone to go to that website, especially if you're just going to mimic the person, Matt Slick. Matt is a very deceptive person, in my personal viewpoint, at least in terms of how he's interacting with Catholic politics. But in any case, this is about Repzion, Matt Slick, so we'll just get to that video. Oh, oh boy. Oh boy, the lagging is just horrible. Alright, that's where I make the first stop. So if I had to guess what Mary was getting at, it's probably evidence that's arrived by through reason or contemplation as opposed to going out and observing the world around you. So, for example, axiomatic statements such as those presented in math would be statements that are a priori, or statements that are deduced by reason, thinking about it, that kind of thing. Whereas empirical evidence is when you go out into the world around you and observe. So, for example, I could sit down and contemplate what 20 times 20 is. But in terms of figuring out whether or not the Earth revolves around the Sun, that's something I go out and gather evidence, make tests, examinations, etc., etc. It's things that make sense in terms of just contemplating about it, that sort of thing. So when you prove or disprove the existence of God using, for example, God's properties, such as the ontological argument, arguing from his properties of greatness, or deducing that two of his properties contradict one another, being all just or all merciful, being a contradiction, that's something that's called um, a priori reasoning, or reasoning before the fact. Pure reason, armchair philosophy. So that's intellectual evidence, just to be short. Okay, I'll just stop it right there. I'll go with points I actually agree with. Atheism is not a worldview in and of itself. It's a part of a worldview. For example, theism is part and parcel of being a Christian. You can't be a Christian without being a theist, at least not a very orthodox one. When it comes to atheism, it might be part of one's worldview, but it doesn't encapsulate the whole thing. Not because it doesn't make any grand generalizations. I mean, atheism at least reports that a belief in God isn't justified, rationally justified. There's no ground in which one can rationally believe in God. For example, one could define atheist as I lack belief, sure, but do you lack belief because there is no evidence, or because belief in God is contrary to reason? Either one works just fine, but the point is the theist hasn't met their burden of proof in terms of rationally justifying God. Even to be a quote unquote weak atheist relies on a claim that the theist hasn't uh, proved their proved or carried their burden. So yeah, atheism not a worldview, part of a worldview, could be part of a worldview, not a worldview. As for the water bottle propelism, uh, what exactly does propel have to do with a worldview entirely? Is it a belief around propel? I just think you failed at that one. Wow, that's a really up-to-date reference. Funny. Okay, let's just stop it right there. It's pronounced methodological, as in relating to methodology. That's a position in philosophy of science as it relates to a method of inquiring or gaining knowledge of the world around you. It's not an ontological sentiment. Materialism is an ontological sentiment or an ontological belief about the makeup of reality, that the only things that exist are extended things, well, um, things that are extended or have dimension to them. That's all that exists. That's materialism right there. Very simple, easy to understand. Methodological naturalism is just one's approach in terms of science, or just only focusing on the natural and observable world. That's about all there is. The question of methodological naturalism has no bearing in terms of what one believes in their ontology. And yes, one doesn't have to be an atheist um, and a materialist. One could be an atheist and a Platonist, believe that concepts are fundamental, for example, such as numbers are the fundamental makeup of reality. That's a position an atheist can take. But methodological naturalism is not concerned with ontology, ontology being the discipline of finding out what the world is literally made of, or what is there in the world itself, in its nature. No, that's empiricism. Methodological naturalism just states that whenever you're doing science, you look for naturalistic explanations, things that you can observe, test, and repeat. You don't look for the supernatural. You don't bother with God or a transcendent reality. You bother with what you can test and repeatedly observe. That's the main difference. Now, now one could technically be an empiricist and not be a methodological naturalist too. That works in the same way. For example, uh, George Berkeley, who was a famous philosopher, was an empiricist who, because only could perceive and test for minds, and everything in reality he observed was just produced to his mind, just believed that only immaterial minds exist. And that's an empiricistic philosophy. There you are. Uh, it doesn't exclude them, no, but it can't test for them. And let's Actually, not so much. It's that he is the absolute, such as that he does not change and he grounds truth, so it itself also cannot change. Well, no, he asked you to state your belief, so he's not attaching that to you right away. With in terms of what he said when he meant atheism entails moral relativism, I think that's a position he wants to set out to prove. If he doesn't, yeah, I consider that to be a failure on his end, but he is, in fact, giving you a chance to state your moral claims. Oh, not your moral claims, your claims on truth. Ooh, there's a distinction. Wait a minute. If I remember correctly, in your video with, I remember correctly, in your last video addressing some Christian, his name I really forget. I thought you took the position that you believe in subjective or relative morality. There's a difference to yours, by the way. Subjective morality is that morals and moral claims exist, but they're ultimately in the mind of humans. And relativism just states that moral claims, be they objective or subjective, um, is relative from person to person. Huge distinction. You can actually be a moral objectivist and a relativist at the same time. That morality is grounded in something else outside of the mind, but in fact differs from person to person. They're not necessarily veiled. Wait, do you don't know if absolute truth exists? One could easily state or ask you, are you absolutely sure about that? Literally, one could just say, and if you were to say yes, you'd have to admit there is something that is absolutely true, namely that you don't know if absolute truth exists. Okay, yeah, just so we don't get bogged down in stupidity, I'm just going to claim, in terms of discovering what truth is, there are many philosophies and positions on this. Um, the two main ones I'm familiar with are deflationary, which just says truth is a meaningless concept, or is a concept that isn't that is in itself empty, and correspondence theory. That truth is that which corresponds to reality. So, for example, if let's take a quick, the cat is on the mat. The analytical statement there is a cat and it's on a mat corresponds to a reality, that which is the case where a cat is sitting on a mattress or a mat. So there's just two examples right there. And it's far more difficult than a YouTube video deserves, but Mr. Repzion, at least by admitting that you don't know about the subject, you've earned some points with me. But, you know, just see where it goes from here. not a trick question. He wants to compare worldviews. He wants to say, okay, this is your view, and this is my view, which is the Christian view, and my view makes more sense. Ergo, this is why I believe in it, over what's entailed by believing what you believe. I think it's more of a presuppositionalist method of attack, in, where instead of one defends one's own claims, one puts the question more of a dialectical format, where two people exchange their own positions and draw an end from that exchange. Although a lot of presuppositionalists I know don't tend to go that route. But anyway. Oh. Okay, so far it sounds like uh, what philosophers known as a correspondence theory of truth. Wait, what? Truth is subjective? So the way I think of truth and the way someone else thinks of truth could be completely relative. So you so on the question of truth, you are a relativist. You believe everybody has their own truth because it's ultimately rooted in everyone's subjective mental states or mental states, thus rendering it subjective. No, no, no. Does not. You science does not determine truth in the same way that you're thinking. What science does is it takes propositions, tests, and models to determine facts about the world around it, how certain mechanisms operate, for example, and then puts it in practice. And then when other better systems come up, the previous ones are falsified. So science, in a sense, doesn't tell us about the truth of reality, rather it falsifies bad notions of it. And we stick to the scientific models that are working in our favor because, well, ultimately they work, and that gives us a justifiable reason to hold to them. Now, whether or not they hold up is a different fact. But science does not tell us the truth about reality, but falsifies models that don't really work that well, at least according to a basic Popperian viewpoint. That doesn't mean truth is subjective. That just means that our understanding of the world around us changes. It doesn't mean that reality itself changes. Alright, this was just a pain in my ass. So yeah, I'm done.